know about you, but when I'm having a hard time and someone says, take good care of yourself, it just doesn't land very well. It ends up feeling like one more task on a to-do list that is already long and feeling hard, if not impossible, to manage. Also, it kind of puts the onus of care back on me, even if the person saying it doesn't actually mean it that way. Now, what do I wish people would say instead? Well, just like anytime I've asked someone who is grieving for a good alternative to, I'm sorry for your loss, the answer is, I'm not really sure. I know, that's not very helpful. But it's exactly this dilemma that prompted today's episode on caring for the caregivers. I asked my colleague, Rebecca Hobbs-Lawrence, to come share some of her knowledge on what caregivers can do to actually take care of themselves and what friends and family can do to provide truly meaningful support. After Rebecca's father died, she grew up watching her mother struggle with the pressures of now being the only adult caregiver in their family. So she knows a lot about this topic personally. But Rebecca has also been supporting families both before and after a death for over 2 decades in her role at Dougy Center. Rebecca and I talk about why it can be so tough for caregivers who are grieving to care for themselves when they are also caring for children and other family members. We also get into some practical tips, both for caregivers and for those who want to support them. Okay, here's our conversation. Rebecca Hobbs-Lawrence, welcome back to Grief Out Loud. I've lost track of how many times you've been on the show, but I'm always grateful every time you do come on the show.
Looking forward to doing this with you.
And for listeners who are just hearing your voice for the first time, can you give a quick professional and personal introduction?
I am the Pathways Program and Grief Services Coordinator here at Dougy Center, which means I have bereavement groups that I coordinate with kids, but I also oversee our Pathways Program for families living with an advanced serious illness. And I've been here, I'll just say more than 2 decades. How's that?
And you also have personal loss and grief that you brought into this role.
I do. My father died when I was 11 from heart cancer. So I know I watched my mom as a caregiver, and I also have children and grandchildren and have supported them and myself through numerous deaths in our family over the years, and am also a caregiver for my mom who has Alzheimer's.
So this is why I invited you to come talk about this topic of how caregivers can support themselves, but also how other people in their community can be supporting them. When we're talking about caregiver, I mean, that word can mean so many different things. I'm thinking about parents, grandparents, other adults who are grieving a loss themselves, but are also caring for kids, teens, and young adults who are grieving. Mm-hmm. But with your experience with Pathways, I think that term caregiver also expands to adults who are caring for someone in their life who has an illness, while also caring for kids and teens in their life who are part of that family. And you've talked, a little bit about this, but I wonder if you could share a little bit more, like what is your specific experience with supporting caregivers in these situations?
I think that the role I see as caregivers is that they have so many roles that they are playing. As adults, we have so many kind of requirements of being an adult. We have to hold a job. We have to pay bills. We have to make sure our children are in school and doing well, connecting with friends, going to doctor's appointments. I think there's just so many hats to play for caregivers. And that's true, obviously, for like a parental caregiver or a guardian caregiver, but grandparents and other family members and close friends can also play a huge part in all of that.
And that's an almost impossible task to do when everything's going well.
Right.
The school, the doctor's appointments, the grocery shopping, like all that. It's like a plenty. And then a death occurs or an illness becomes into play. What have you heard over the years from caregivers about that initial like introduction to this new world.
Right. Whether it's a diagnosed illness that is creating a complete change in their life or a death. First, I think overwhelm, just that sense of overwhelm. And in pathways, I hear this all the time, but oh my gosh, can I do this? And then I have to do this. And then how am I going to do this? And it seems like impossible, like you just said, like when things are going well, just all those logistics to manage are a full-time plus job. And where do you create the time and space to do that, but even more so? And while you're grieving, while you are emotionally discharging a lot into your kids, but also like you're feeling a deficit. So when that grieving is happening for an adult caregiver and to manage, like let's say grief takes you inward to those places in yourself that you have your own needs to get met. But as a parent or a caregiver, your focus really is outward into the emotional needs of your children or the people in your care. And balancing both of those and creating time for both of those is logistically, it feels impossible for a lot of caregivers. And so, what tends to go? Caring for themselves. So, they tend to focus far more outward on the needs of others. And I think that's the most common thing I hear.
Well, and I appreciate this like internal, external, right? That grief can really take us internally to like focused on how it's impacting us. And then the external of like, how do I support everybody else in my life who still needs me to do all the things for them, even though this devastating occurrence is happening. When I think about, we have so many resources, right, on how to support kids and teens who are grieving. And it's like, well, why doesn't that just apply to the caregivers? Like, why is it different? And I think particularly around that internal piece, the external is obvious, right? Like, I mean, kids have a lot of responsibilities, teens have a lot of responsibilities, but not in the same way that their adult caregivers do.
Right.
What do you see as similar or different for that internal experience of grief for kids and teens versus adults?
Right. Well, I think grief is, I mean, I think everyone is going to be like nodding their head yes to this, right? Grief is just that normal automatic response to loss. And so kids, teens, adults are all going to feel that. And I think that the difference might be is that, I mean, one is just personalities. We all come to grief and our responses to grief and expressions of grief differently. And like how you and I are going to express our grief is going to look different, not just on the outside, but how we are perceiving and internalizing it is going to be different for us too. But for kids and teens, what I often see is that they are, I don't know, more often adept at being able to regulate the discomfort of grief. I hear a lot of kids talk about like being really sad and then being like, and then I had to go play with my friends. And what a great response. Like they know that they need to regulate in a way that being in that intensity of pain and hurt for very long does not feel good to them. And they know they need out of it in some way. They're like, yep, I need that distraction, or I need to modulate that in a way that they can keep going, in a way that they can attend to themselves and the things they're interested in. They like being in community, like kids in school, they want to be with their friends. And so even when they grieve, I mean, they may take some time off from school for a little while, but what I hear often again is kids are like, I can't wait to go back to school. Or on a long break, they're like, I miss my friends. I miss my friends. I miss my friends. They need to have that social connection. I think for adults, the difference is that because of the multiple roles that adults play, that they almost get tunnel vision in what they need to do so that the responsibilities become the priority, and the things that they may have naturally known earlier on, like, I need to have good sleep, or I do need to make sure I stay in touch with friends, just so that I realize I have different identities I hold besides that of caring for my kids or my partner who's sick, or I need to make sure that I'm getting enough hydration and nutrition into my body and my kids' bodies. Just there's so many things that they're trying to put on their list of what's one, what's two, what's three to do, that their grief, the way they're impacted by the grief, sometimes kind of, I want to say, gets like pushed in, pushed down. I think they find it more challenging to respond to. And honestly, I think it becomes less clear for them what is what, which I don't blame them. You have a lot going on. That is a very, very full plate.
This is kind of more of the same type of question. What challenges have you heard over the years from adult caregivers when they're faced with this very real dilemma of, I'm having emotions about my grief, and now my kid is having emotions about their grief? How can I, like, what do I do? Do I just shove mine and be there for my kid? Do we have them together? Like, what have you heard from adults in different ways that they've navigated that really real, tangible, heart-wrenching dilemma?
I think the first thing that adults often will just talk about is that tension between holding both of those spaces. And again, I think this is part of our cultural context too, of being very much an either or. We're either sad or we're happy. We kind of pick sides. And what I love about listening to adults in a peer support group is that how they find an equilibrium often in their own conversations about how all those spaces can be held simultaneously, and that they can have these responses in their own grief and their own pain and hurt and confusion, and also be able to acknowledge that their kids may be feeling something very similar, or they may be feeling something completely different in their grief. And that is okay. And then the test is, right, how do I sit with my own grief then as I am grieving, and acknowledging those pieces in me that hurt, that are angry, that yearn for something different, and how do I support my children? And some of that is time management, like how can you do both? You can't do it simultaneously sometimes. So some of it is time management, and also finding the right tools for you and your children, because it's not a one size fits all.
Now you've got me thinking about two very different experiences, and I'm curious if you have any like stories around both of these. One is which a parent, maybe the other parent who dies, they had a complicated relationship, or they were separated or divorced or estranged in some way. And then their kids are missing their other parent and perhaps had a very different relationship with that parent, a more like, I don't know, loving, connected one. Or, I'm just thinking of it like, daddy was the best, and other parent is like, well, I got,
Right. That is not what, right.
That was not my experience.
Right. That was not my experience.
So thinking about like what suggestions you might have for adults who are in that situation. But then on the other side of it, I'm thinking specifically about the work that you've done over the years with families where it was a sibling who died. So you have a child or a teen, it was their sibling who died, and their parents are grieving, and they're grieving, and it's often very different. And the parents may have specific ways that they want to show up for their kid and teen. That just gets kind of complex too. So, yeah.
So the first one, because those are, I think, very different ways of being and supporting with your children. The first one, Yes, I think just acknowledging that you had a very different experience with the other adult is huge. And to know, I think so often we either want children, again, it's that either or. We want our children to have all the information right away or none of it for a really long time. And so sometimes adults are quick to point out to their children all the bad things that that other adult did, so that they feel like their child is almost a peer now to their own experience. The kids have their own experience, then they need to have their own experience. So I think as adults, just for us to be able to back up when we may not have had a connection with that other person that feels as warm and connecting as the kids have. I think it can be helpful sometimes just to provide all your attention to them for that and just allow them to have all the experience that they need for that. I've also, though, heard adults talk about how at first they were very resistant to wanting to even have this be understanding to their children's grief when this other parent they feel maybe did them wrong in some way or wasn't there and supportive of them as either a partner or a parent. And what so often I have heard them come to, though, is, well, what was the initial reason I was with that person? What brought me to that person? And even if everything in most recent memory is feels negative, is there some place that they can go where they can offer their children a really genuine moment where their parents did feel connected in some way? And it doesn't have to be very much. Kids actually do not need very much in that, but that can be very helpful. And it can give them a place where they can talk about that person together in a very genuine way, um, and and have it actually be meaningful and fun, for both the parent and the kids too. So that can happen, and that happens sometimes, um, in my group with a suicide death, where there may have been a lot of challenges in the family amongst the adults, especially for a while, and where that is the place that they ultimately go so that they can support their kids and have that sense of kind of continuity of a family story too.
And I think too about how important it is for those adults then to have some outlet where they can talk about all the complexities of the relationship, to not feel like they have to shove their own experience and the reality of what that relationship was like, so that they have a little spacing.
Definitely. That's really good to point out. Like, because I'm speaking from that place of them being in a peer support and having, like you said, that community of peers where they can do that. And obviously, for people who are not have access to a peer support for that, to be able to lean into other family or friends who can provide that is absolutely necessary.
Mm.
Yes. Mm. And then you talked about siblings, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, at least in my experience, I've had some interactions with teens, particularly, where it was a sibling who died and both of their parents are still alive. And the parents' grief feeling so big, and the caregivers needing a lot of support for themselves, but then also maybe like wanting, I don't even know what my question is, because we're supposed to be talking about how caregivers can support themselves. So I guess speaking directly to caregivers who've had a child die, how do they support themselves while also supporting and acknowledging the grief of their other children?
Right. Oh my goodness. I think first to come to that space that, right, that is a very different experience, having your child die and having a sibling that has died. Because I think, and I know this as a parent myself, that, I'm like, my primary job is to keep them alive. Right. And so whether it's an accident or an illness or anything, there is that sense of like, is I think parents naturally have that sense of what did I do wrong, possibly, that this happened. And that is a whole nother topic, right? but in that though, so often I remember having some siblings in one of my groups where they talked about their sister had a health issue and how they would say, well, she was that my parents always talked about her before she died. Like she was the center of attention. Everything was about her. And now that she's died, everything is still about her. And really saying to us that I don't know if I've ever had a time where it was about me. And so I think for adults who have had a child that has died, to be in that kind of intense grief and self exploration, too, of what did I do? What didn't I do? Could I have done something differently? Even when you have other children, your identity shifts as a caregiver with the death of a child. That having to balance all that with still caring for your children and giving them space to grieve a sibling who is really that is the person who died now is the closest thing to understanding what they themselves are going through. Like siblings are your foe and ally, and they're also the ones that are like, yeah, I know you can say anything about mom and dad, right? And they may agree with you or not disagree with you, but they know what you're talking about. um, and so just to recognize what that means in the family for the siblings too. And that can be, I think that can be incredibly challenging for adults. I think what I often see and hear adults talk about is how they either become very permissive, like their children have gone through so much pain now. And this is not just a sibling death. Sometimes this can happen with parental deaths too, but that like, oh, I want them to be able to experience everything they can experience, or they're so exhausted and tired that they kind of throw their hands in the air and be like, I can't do this right now, right? I'm kind of done. Or they become ultra, what I often see too is they become ultra protective of the siblings, the children that they have. And so when one child dies, the parents might become ultra protective, ultra controlling. Where are you all times? Who are you with? And the space, going back to caregiving itself, then caregiving, just the task of caregiving for yourself allows you to create space for identifying in yourself what are your own needs as a caregiver, as a parent, and how can I get my needs met too? Because if we don't stop long enough to do that, then we are just on the wheel that keeps going. Everything's more automatic response, go, 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 instead of intentional. What am I going to do intentionally now? I think that's important at all times, but in those situations, definitely when they become even more intense, I think it's even more important to stop, create the pause, and be like, what am I doing for myself?
Which is a great lead in to the next question. I mean, we've established why it's so important for caregivers to have some attention to go back to themselves. We've talked about what are some of the barriers to doing that. And then always the hardest question of all, like, what can caregivers do to care for themselves, knowing that it's going to be different for every person, but in general, what suggestions do you have?
Right. Keep it simple. So actually, I know we use that acronym of being able to attune to your own needs and emotions, nurturing our own bodies and minds, and distractions. So I think that keeping it simple is important. So thinking about for self-care for adults, like how do you attune to your own emotional needs? And that's going to be different for everybody. Some of us like to express outwardly all over the place. And some of us do not want anybody to know If we are having a bad day, it shouldn't show. Like we're just like not going to show, and everything in between, right? Like, and so being able to, what is your comfort zone for being able to attune to your own emotions? And more so, like, are you aware of what your emotions are? You don't need everybody else to be aware of them necessarily, but what do you know what they are? What are you feeling in the moment? And is there a need there that needs to be met for you? Do you need to talk to somebody about it? Do you need to do some artwork or journaling around it? Do you need to go take a walk and think at the same time to move that through? Like, what is it that you're needing around that? And then I think around nurturing is that both with like the physical responses of grief impact our bodies in ways that I think sometimes we feel like we should have some control over. Like, why am I having these headaches? Why does my stomach always hurt? Why am I feeling so much fatigue? If I'm doing it, am I doing something wrong? And to just realize that one, that is a natural response to grief, all of those things and more. And we can support our bodies by treating them kindly and making sure we are drinking water. Like people don't say stay hydrated just for the fun of it. Like there's an importance to that, right? That our muscles work better when we have water in our bodies. Our chest, that tightness in our chest that we feel when we're grieving actually will get better if we have enough water in our bodies too. Like all of those muscles constrict. There's a real biological reason why we need to nurture ourselves that way. So being able to know there's a real reason for it, I'm not doing it just to pass time in a way that the books are telling me to for self-care. Like getting good nutrients into our body. Sleep is huge. We already know that sleep impacts not just how we, the next day, how we're doing, if we're sleepy and yawning, but it also impacts our immune systems. So being able to make sure we get enough sleep, like what are the things we need to do that? So I think for adults in caregiving, like how do you do that? Pick those topics, and in those topics, what works for you. And the things I do share with adults when we do talk about it in pathways is what are things that have already worked for you in the past? What are you comfortable with? This is not the time to try to start something new. If you haven't, been going to the gym and exercising, 3 times a week, I mean, maybe it will feel good right now, but maybe this isn't the time to start that. Like don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Make it manageable pieces. So if your dog needs to be walked, can you be the person to go walk the dog a few times a week? What are those things that you have enjoyed that you feel like, okay, I can put this into my repertoire, or just make sure that I continue doing it. It's easy when we're grieving to let things fall off. Even things that were once normal in our daily routines might fall off. So just paying attention to doing that. And I think also we will say, and I am notorious for this, like I just don't have the time now. If I'm caring for my kids and I'm caring for my mom with Alzheimer's and I have a job and I have all these things, I don't have time. And then so I am the big one of 5 minutes or less. That is my total. I'm always like, I can do anything in 5 minutes. So even if I can stair step for 5 minutes, I will take 5 minutes and just hum. I will, especially when I'm in my car and my mind goes onto like autopilot of like my big long to-do list. I will just stop and hum for 5 minutes. So I think it is making it manageable too.
I love the idea of 5 minutes because I can be like, I don't even have 5 minutes. I'm like, I could probably find 5 minutes
5 minutes.
to do something.
Well, and when I don't have 5 minutes, because that does happen, Janet, I go to like, okay, 1 minute of box breathing. Like, do I have a minute then? Like I negotiate with myself. But I think more than I like that 1 minute too is whether it's 5 minutes, 1 minute, 30 minutes, like where can you create pause in your life to attend to yourself? And when I feel like I'm on the hamster wheel with caregiving, I will often just tell myself, like, my code word is pause. And I will kind of stop and I will very quickly figure out, like, how much time do I have to give to this? Or do I need to create that time somewhere else later on? And so in that minute, it might be like, I only have time to breathe, or I have 5 minutes to go and take a walk outside. And sometimes in that 5 minutes, I'll be like, you know what? In this 5 minutes, I'm going to call my friend, just hear her voice and say, hey, can we go have coffee next Wednesday? So then it's putting that out there. Massages are awesome, but sometimes in the moment, that's just not where we're at.
I was thinking too about how sometimes those things we do every day, and sometimes in grief, we stop doing some of those too. But how there's a way, at least for me, sometimes when it's just such a bananas day, there's no time. I'll be like, oh, I am brushing my teeth. This is self-care. I'm taking 2 minutes to brush my teeth. I'm taking a shower. This is also self-care, even though it doesn't really feel like it because it's something I have to do every day, but that it truly is a moment of like attending to my literal physical bodily needs can
Right.
be perceived as self-care, so that when you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, I didn't do all these other things, you'd be like, oh, but let me think about the things I did do to actually care for myself today.
Right. No, I love that. And to be able to do multiple, like in the shower, I can say I am taking care of myself physically and spend a few minutes of like I can deep breathe in the shower. I can find connection in the shower. I can find release in the shower. I mean, how many people listening to this podcast can raise their hand and be like, I've cried in the shower, right? Like you can nurture yourself in multiple ways doing one thing even. And it does, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I love that idea that are just very normal day-to-day things that we do are attending to ourselves. Yeah.
Well, now that we gave caregivers who are listening a long list of things to do to care for themselves, we don't mean it that way, listeners, we promise.
No, no.
I wanted to spend some time talking about and to the other people. So the supporters of these caregivers, whether it's friends, family members, other people in their community who are like, oh my gosh, my friend's partner just died. They have 2 young kids. I want to help. What do I do? And I think about Dougy Center's, our 10 core principles of grief-informed practice, and one of those being relational connection and perceived support. So what ideas do we have for these folks who are like, I just want to help, that the support can actually be perceived as helpful?
Well, I think first, I think it's so important actually to know what kind of helper we are. Like, because trying to be a helper that we're not will not last very long. And that's even worse when you say you're going to be there for somebody to do something and then you fall off right away because you're like, oh, wait, I don't actually like doing that. And it sounds kind of silly, but I'm like, what kind of helper are you? Are you a listener? Are you one of those people that can be the shoulder to cry on, to be the ear that gets vented to? That just needs, and when someone needs that expression of grief that can be intense, can you sit there in it with them without fixing it? Can you just, be present? If you're that helper, offer that. If you are one of those doers that like, I can go pick up kids from school. I can go grocery shopping for you. I can mow the lawn. Like if you're a doer, offer those pieces of yourself. And if you're somebody who's like, I don't know if I can do any of those, but I could distract. I I can take you out to dinner. I can take you to a movie. We can go, like, I can play board games and laugh with you when you're ready to laugh. Like, if you're needing that, I'm your person. So, first of all, know what you're capable of giving so you're not promising something you can't do. And I think the other piece is, and they can be hard conversations, is to ask the person who's grieving too. Say, these are the things I can do for you. Would any of this be helpful or something like it? And I know a lot of caregivers will say, I'm so exhausted. I just can't even ask for help. And so it's just easier to do it myself. But there is that piece for caregivers who are grieving that also need to be receptive to the people coming to them to say they want to help. Like there has to be a meeting in the middle somewhere, and that's only going to happen with clear communication too. Like both parties do have to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable, and it might get messy and hard at times, and that's okay. But I think ideally, when you know what kind of support you can help somebody with, I can make you dinners. Just tell me what your kids like. What do they like to eat? What don't they like to eat? So you're not asked, so the ask of the caregiver isn't huge, in that way. To even say things like, I can mow your lawn. Would that be helpful to you? And if they're like, no, is there something else outside that would be helpful for me to work on for you? Maybe their fence needs mending, like, so I think that's at least the beginning of a conversation. But yeah, if you are just saying to somebody, what do you need? And they ask you for something that you are not really willing to do for them, then that's going to create conflict from the very beginning. And let's try to avoid that.
I've never felt so seen because whenever something goes down in my larger friend group, people love to put together a meal train, and it's my nightmare. Like I barely cook for myself. And so the thought of having to come up and cook for other people and meet their dietary needs and get all this, I'm like, so not my scene. I have so many other skills I can provide. So thank you for the permission to just say no to the meal train and show up in different ways.
Yes.
And I know for me, my go-to ones was like, what can I do to help this person who's now solo parenting? I'm like, childcare, which I don't know if that's universally true for all caregivers, but I feel like it's a good go-to. Like just offer to take the kids or come over to the house and hang with the kids so that a caregiver adult can take a shower or go do something, because they used to have, not always, but if they were in a situation where they had another adult, they don't have that now. They don't have that backup. And so to be that other adult who can help with the kids in some way seems so valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, and this is part on the caregiver then asking for help too. And we haven't really talked about that too much because it can be really hard. But as caregivers, again, we're in a culture that isn't good at it, but like it's okay to ask for help. And what I love, and I've seen this in pathways at times, adults saying that they've picked one, especially in their school community where there's one adult. Sometimes it's a good friend, sometimes it hasn't been a good friend. Like it's just another kid's parent that has come to them and said, I can help organize this. Do you want me for the next month or two to just kind of be your liaison about what you're needing and wanting for childcare? Tell me when, like, do you need your kids picked up or taken back home? Do you, do they have practices they need to get to? Do you need to have them have play times? And I can talk to the other parents of the classmates and we will figure out how to make that all happen for you. And I love that community, but that also it doesn't rely on the caregiver to plan it all. There's somebody willing within the community that knows all the people who can help coordinate that. And like you said, give them a time to be able to take the showers, go grocery shopping without their kids. I mean, that's huge because, kids throw everything in the shopping cart. I'm just going to say that. You always leave and it's twice as much money. So just being able to do simple daily tasks even and know your kids are being cared for and are doing something they enjoy so that you can attend to yourself is huge.
Is there more you want to say, Rebecca, about caregivers themselves learning how to ask for help? Because
That's
it really is a learning curve.
It is a learning curve. And it's something, even as somebody who does this professionally for so long as I have, it was a learning curve for me too. Um, I saw my dad died when I was 11, like I said, and I saw some really good friends offer help. And actually, I saw one of our friends. She never even just offered. She was a doer to the max. She would just come in and swoop me and my brother up and leave. So my mom didn't even have time to really. She was like, okay, um, but it wasn't modeled to me, like asking for help. And as an adult, it took me a long time to ask for like what. And there's this place of being vulnerable and also knowing kind of the end game, because it is exhausting to ask for help too, and to be able to articulate with people what is it that I really want and need, because that means I have to do some work figuring out for myself first what I want, need. And sometimes in the midst of a crisis or deep grief, we don't know what we want or need. Like, it just feels mucky and dark, and we're like, I have no idea. And so there is a little work to be able to sit and figure that out. And sometimes you have friends or family that can help you do that too. But ultimately, just that the task of saying I need help can open up a lot of opportunities. One, for you to get the support you need, but it also can open up opportunities for very meaningful connections with other people that you didn't even know you needed, and that they become people in your lives that you can count on and lean into. And we all need a community that we can lean into.
I have this image of like a safety net, but being forged in a fire. So it's much more
Yeah.
solid, that you can rely on it in that way. As we come to the end of this conversation, Rebecca, you've mentioned a couple of things that you turn to for self-care, pausing and 5 minutes, but just in honor of like how different self-care or care for self can look depending on the individual, just like our grief can look so different. What's a practice you've been turning to a lot lately?
Well, I'll say two. Meditation is, and I mean, that might go with the pause, but having an intentional time that I can reconnect to myself and reconnect to nature and reconnect. We're going to say, because we're always connected, just remind myself that I am connected to so much more. That time is really has been a game changer for me. But also, and on this one, I'm going to say is totally like frivolous and funny. Um, but when everything does seem outside of my control, I also will lean into what are the things that do make me happy. Very recently, what made me happy is making a list of my Halloween dinner with everything. Like, and it seems silly, and I'll do that for the next holiday and the next holiday and the next holiday, maybe. But what is that also that I am connected to? Because those kinds of moments have a lifetime of memories for me. And even though each year can be different, I can lean into that stability of time that those kind of pavers, those milestones offer me to kind of ground myself, and give me also kind of a beacon to the future for me to point myself to, as I'm kind of like re-navigating my compass, to move forward. Um, and so it's silly, but it also, I fully understand the meaning behind it for me too.
What a great example of how self-care is so different for each of us, because making a
Right.
menu would stress me out. I would need to go do a lot more self-care.
Right. It's not for everybody. But I love that there's something. I love that there's something different for each of us. And it doesn't matter if it's something we're all like, oh, that's so amazing, or like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like it's really about what is meaningful to the person.
Well, Rebecca, thank you for having this conversation with me. I knew you were going to be the perfect person to talk to outline, why it's not so simple to just say to a caregiver who's grieving, make time for yourself and take care of yourself. Like,
Right.
what does that actually mean? So I appreciate, being able to go through what are the barriers, internal and external to that, reiterating why it's important, and then finding different creative ways for people to think about how can I truly care for myself and how can I ask my community to help me in that care. So yeah, really thankful for you and your time and your insights today.
Well, thank you, Jana.
And listeners, I say this to you each and every single time, but thank you for being part of our show, for being part of the community, for sharing episodes with people, for reaching out to me to tell me what the show means to you. If you'd like to connect with me, you can email me at griefoutloud@dougy.org. That's dougy.org. That's also our main website where you can find all of our free downloadable resources, information about our local programming, and of course, each and every episode of Grief Out Loud. I'm always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.